In impending future years, the onslaught of environmental degradation, deforestation, and nuclear warfare have wrought rampant destruction upon our home planet Earth. Damage to the extent that cities across the globe are gradually being reduced to mere piles of rubble. Issues of power and food scarcity are rife, coupled with a perilous reduction in oxygen levels. By the year of 2067, few urban locations remain intact, one of which is located in Australia, thanks to the availability of man-made oxygen. Regrettably, this oxygen is contaminated and leads to a disease known as the sickness. Ethan White and his closest comrade, Jude, meet their responsibilities as utility workmen, striving to keep the city's neutral reactor steady and ensure a power supply. Once a day's labor concludes, their supervisor scans them to ascertain everyone's health status. One worker reveals his inability to return the next day, leading Ethan to cover his shift for bonus oxygen credits. However, the supervisor mercilessly dismisses the man regardless. On his routine journey home, Ethan comes across a protester advocating that oxygen should not be a luxury and urging sacrifices for upcoming generations. Unlike other indifferent passers-by, Ethan is accosted by the recently jobless man, distressed because his offspring are afflicted with the sickness. Their heated debate is cut short as the protestor spontaneously bursts into flames. During his evening news intake at home, Ethan learns that the protestor self-immolated as a homage to the last surviving plant. The story also highlights a surge in deaths from the sickness, and how Chronicorp, the company responsible for oxygen production, has vowed to find a solution. Despite this, unrest mounts amidst fears of human extinction. The news segment moves on to the unfortunate demise of Chronicorp's primarily scientist Richard, who also happens to be Ethan's father. This forces Ethan to switch off the television. Just then, Ethan's wife Xanthi makes her entrance, prompting Ethan to present her with a new oxygen mask. As their playful interaction ensues, Xanthi suddenly coughs up blood as a symptom of the sickness, but quickly reassures Ethan of her well-being. Sometime later, Ethan and Jude receive a summons to the Chronicorp's office. Here, they encounter Regina, the company's chief technical officer, who informs Ethan of his unexpected yet vital role in humanity's survival before leading them to the lab. The team, headed by Richard, had initiated the development of a time travel device dubbed the Chronicle 2 decades ago. They've been trialing it by teleporting a timepiece a couple of minutes forward, along with dispatching radio frequencies, receiving a response from the future, 400 years ahead with the message, "Transport Ethan White." Regina hypothesizes that the future generations managed to discover the antidote for the epidemic and will exclusively provide it to Ethan. However, the team is clueless on retrieving Ethan once dispatched. Hence, he must trace those behind the message to secure his return. Post-briefing, Ethan and Jude contemplate over Regina's proposition at a local tavern. The prospect of leaving Xanthi is not ideal for Ethan. However, Jude insists that her survival may rely on his departure. Jude's attempt to mention Richard is rebutted by Ethan, who recalls his father's unexplained absence, leaving behind an 8-year-old Ethan with a cryptic note and a peculiar gadget attached to his wrist. Ethan's belief is that his mother's demise could have been averted had Richard been present, hence his refusal to abandon Xanthi in a similar manner. Nevertheless, Jude contends that Ethan has to rescue Xanthi to differ from Richard's actions. Reflecting alone, Ethan reminisces about his 8th birthday, awaiting eagerly for his father, who eventually turned up late with an unusual gift: a box. Richard placed young Ethan's hand in the box, informing him of an impending significant decision. Suddenly, a techno bracelet sealed itself around his wrist, causing it to bleed. Despite his mother's opposition, Richard left soon after, asserting that the bracelet was permanent. Haunted by the memory of his mother's passing, Ethan resolves to return home and divulge Chronicorp's scheme to Xanthi. Despite his reluctance to leave her behind, Xanthi urges him to abandon using her as the reason to not rescue mankind and to exhibit trust. She fears for her students who have succumbed to the epidemic and pleads for Ethan to act. In the evening's later hours, Ethan ascends to the rooftop for a panoramic view of the urban landscape. As he grapples to rid himself of the bracelet, a surge of memories from the day his mother met her demise on the bustling streets wash over him. The memory of Jude coming to his aid, providing him with much-needed oxygen from his mask, is particularly striking. As Ethan grapples with his current predicament, he releases a gut-wrenching yell, signifying his resolution. At dawn, he places a metallic blossom at Xanthi's feet, unwittingly leaving behind a promise of return, while she had regained consciousness and was shedding silent tears. Upon reaching the Chronicops headquarters, Ethan formulates a trade-off with Regina. He refuses to proceed unless Xanthi is prioritized for the cure's initial dosage. Regina consents, and they promptly dash off to the laboratory. The scientists describe the operation of the specialized suit and a pocket-sized computer, Archie. Jude's surprise appearance reassures him, pledging to look after Xanthi in his absence. Psyching himself for what's next, Ethan steps into the contraption enveloped in electricity that ultimately propels him into the future using an energy pulse. A portal in the heavens appears, and Ethan plunges with high velocity before crash landing amidst a dense forest, falling unconscious instantly. On regaining consciousness, his suit's blazing state prompts immediate removal and retreat before an explosion occurs. As his body adjusts to the crisp, pure oxygen and sunshine enabling vegetation to thrive in the surrounding habitat, he marvels at the nature around him. Archie becomes his guide, scanning for his bearings, with success proving elusive due to the absence of satellite connection. A resolution is found by embedding a magnet into the soil for Archie to intercept nearby structures, subsequently leading Archie towards the nearest facility. Finding a skeletal figure donning an attire bearing his name at the entrance induces surprise. Locating a decayed Archie under leaf litter and Richard's wristlet on the skeletal wrist, illuminating green, indicates a fatal end, sparking an onset of panic in Ethan. After gathering his composure, he attempts to access the facility, only to find the doors unresponsive. His next and only option is requesting the corroded Archie to play back the last recorded file. The device conveys a twisted voice, asserting that it's for the best as no one has to suffer anymore. A pair of arguing voices is heard, accompanied by a gunshot sound before the machine, rusted and known as Archie, loses power and ceases operations. Observing a wire around the deactivated Archie, Ethan secures similar wiring from his suit and wraps it around his own Archie. This enables her to finally detect a homing signal. Following the signal through dense woodland, Ethan discovers a pair of oxygen dispensers, but not a single human being is found. As the evening approaches, with the assistance of Archie, a fire is started by Ethan, which takes him a significant amount of time. He also stumbles upon some unidentified berries, which he tries but discards almost immediately due to their unpalatable taste. Later, he requests Archie to confirm if it is the year 2474 based on the stars above, a task that brings back memories of stargazing with Richard. However, this reminiscence abruptly concludes as an unwell. Ethan begins vomiting and hallucinating, while a thunderstorm covers the area. Ethan watches a ball of light crash near his encampment, and with his hallucinations growing more intense, Ethan observes a figure charging towards him and subsequently gets stabbed. Losing consciousness momentarily, he awakens to identify the figure as Jude, who had delivered an antidote for the berry poison via injection. The following morning, Jude conveys that Ethan's deteriorating vital signs prompted Chronicorp to utilize their remaining power to dispatch Jude for assistance using the Chronicle. Despite showing Jude a skeleton, Jude dismisses its possibility of being Ethan. They then use Archie for tracking the signal further. Their search leads them to another installation. Upon scanning Ethan's eye, The installation's door opens immediately to a dimly lit interior. In the dull-lit area, the only visible light originates from a screen displaying Ethan's name. Upon pressing enter, Ethan's wrist bracelet activates and it extracts blood for DNA analysis. Believing they were under attack, Jude discloses he has a firearm. The bracelet's light unexpectedly switches to green, signifying Ethan's identity confirmation, and the room's lights are switched on by the computer. Stunned, the pair of them find themselves in the laboratory of Chronicorp. Informed by the computer system, they have 4 hours until the portal activates. Although Jude appears calm, Ethan's concerns escalate. His wrist device is the same green as the skeletal remains nearby. Further scrutiny of the computer system unearths a hologram log from Richard's tenure at Chronicorp. He divulges that a surveillance station has been planted, set to supply information from the future once the atmosphere is habitable. Another entry anticipates a communication from 2474, but receives only the words, "Send Ethan White." Regina queries if physical matter can be transported at present, but the log indicates an energy issue in 2474. Suddenly, the lab's system deactivates and Ethan is warned by the computer about a malfunction with the nuclear core power. Using Archie, they run diagnostics and discover a corruption in the power supply, preventing their return to 2067. They're also cautioned of an imminent nuclear blast if the complication isn't rectified. Jude hurries to locate the necessary instruments. However, Ethan dwells on the reveals. Chronicorp had prior knowledge of the malfunction, having received the message while still at this location, suggesting a fix and a cure. Yet he cannot understand why they kept them in the dark about the power outage and chose Jude, who happened to be a volunteer, over a medical professional. Despite Ethan's desire to gauge the situation, Jude urges them to prioritize repairs. Their disagreement escalates. Eventually, Ethan capitulates and agrees to execute repairs, assuming they find the message sponsor post-repair. They traverse through the woodland, heading for the city, now in decay and overrun by vegetation. Unsettling finds of numerous skeletons and proof of no survivors from the period he had traveled from led Ethan to conclude Earth had essentially waited for human life to expire, only to rejuvenate itself. Becoming anxious, they visit Xanthi's institution and make a disconcerting discovery. The skeletal remains of the pupils lay where they died, right inside the classrooms. Confronted with this scene, Ethan cannot shake off the belief that their mission will end in failure. His heart sinks when he recognizes Xanthi's skeleton still clutching the metallic flower. Memories of the past flood Ethan's mind, overshadowed by grief. Richard's failed rendezvous, the insurgent who mercilessly took his mum's life and stole Ethan's oxygen supply, and the rescue by Jude. The onslaught of intense memories triggers a panic attack, quelled eventually by Jude. Ethan cries and regrets leaving Xanthi alone, still thinking that he can't change anything. According to him, their current state was preferred as it held no suffering. Shocked, Ethan identifies these exact sentiments from a previous conversation with the corroded Archie. Seeking verification, he replays the recording and discerns an argument concluding with Jude discharging his gun. When Jude reveals his firearm, a bewildered Ethan questions its purpose in such desolate circumstances, sparking off a dispute. Archie's reminder of the 2-hour countdown to a nuclear detonation forces them to act. They inspect the tunnels, discovering a damaged nuclear core. After multiple failed efforts to redirect the power, an automatic security measure attempts to close the door. Jude securely lodges a metal rod to keep it open. However, Ethan removes the bar, consequently trapping Judy outside upon hearing a warning of record chamber depressurization. In an attempt to counteract the failing conditions, Ethan initiates an oxygen purge. This move brings back the power but renders him unconscious. A frantic Jude smashes the glass to introduce oxygen, reviving Ethan. On their return to the lab, they recognize their tight timeline, with just 37 minutes until the portal's activation. An unsettling revelation occurs when Ethan discovers a door leading to his skeleton, forcing him to confront his previously denied future. Amid the battery exchange of the two Archies, accusations against Jude surface, implying a sinister plan against Ethan. Then she has the rusty Archie play the last thing the other Ethan saw, and the recording shows Jude threatening Ethan with a gun, asking him to react. Jude fervently denies any intention of shooting Ethan, and a dispute sparks off when Jude suggests they remain in their current location, a proposal that Ethan rejects, not wanting to desert those facing imminent danger. Subsequently, Ethan forcefully pries open another door to reveal a utility room devoid of masks. Jude maintains their inability to save everyone, but Ethan dismisses him and turns his attention to a computer to play a log that was recorded on his 8th birthday. Richard's voice flows from the speakers, admitting a past error, but his message is abruptly cut off by Jude powering down the system. In a fit of anger, Ethan imprisons Jude in the utility room and restores power to conclude the message. Richard then voices his actions were for his son, and additionally, he wished to communicate this in person, so he telephoned the house asking young Ethan to accompany his mother on a walk to meet him. However, prior to his departure, Regina and Jude infiltrated the lab, cornering him. Regina's plot unraveled as she expressed her desire to use the Chronicle to transport a chosen group of superior individuals to the future, forsaking the mission to find a remedy while blaming humans as the genuine virus. Richard resists collaboration and reveals that he had set up the system such that only Ethan in the future could initiate it, leading an enraged Regina to draw a firearm and inquire a scientist about the feasibility of sending at least one person to rectify the power problem. Upon receiving affirmative reply from the scientist, Regina shoots Richard dead. Jude frees himself from captivity in the chaos, attempting but failing to halt the recording, causing the full truth to be disclosed. Regina had dispatched a team to assassinate Ethan's mother and appointed Jude and Ethan's guardian. A shattered Ethan assaults Jude, confronting him about the utility throughout these years, and a new disagreement erupts regarding future actions. Ethan begins unplugging cables in an attempt to deactivate the Chronicle, but Jude assaults him, pushing him into a wall and pleading with him to resist. Ethan, despite having a gun pointed at his head, stands his ground and refuses to fight, expressing his faith in his sibling. Witnessing Ethan's anguish causes memories of their first encounter to flood back for Jude. Riddled with guilt, he offers a remorseful apology before self-erasing. Regina, meanwhile, is preparing the elite team for evading capture. She charges a security man with ending Ethan's life as they reach the future. Ethan, on his end, is grappling with dread, instinctively reaching for Jude's hand, but he returns to his senses when the digital system responds to a signal from Regina's group. This is the catalyst for him realizing he has been the one operating everything in the lab. He drafts the "Send Ethan White" note with a determined plan in mind. Presently, Regina waits for a countdown to cease, only to be met with the Chronicle shutting down instead of a portal manifesting. Inside the device, they find flora planted by Ethan, a canned item, and video footage of Richard's brutal demise. Fast-forwarding to the future, Ethan proceeds to dismantle the Chronicle to prevent further misuse. News reports currently broadcast details of Regina's confinement, along with updates on scientists utilizing the newly discovered greenery in a bid to initiate environmental rejuvenation. An employee of Chronic Cop delivers a named can to Xanthi, who is overcome with emotion on discovering a live flower inside. Ethan buries Jude by a river at some future point, placing a metallic blossom atop the grave. Suddenly spotting a butterfly nearby, Ethan is reminded of his father's teachings about the interconnectedness of the universe throughout time. He bolts back to the laboratory, discovering his skeletal remains have vanished. Energized by the potential for change, Ethan sprints towards the city via the forest, this time filled with the sight of a thriving mankind, their structures harmoniously fused with the natural surroundings.